I know how much you like it when we talk about Super Famicom games, so let's do it again. Part 5, I think that we're doing this, and we got 5 games to talk about, so let's get right into it. Tetris itself needs absolutely no introduction, but how many of you know Tetris 2 or Tetris Flash on the Super Famicom? So the first version of Tetris 2 released on the Famicom in September 1993, 4 years after the original Tetris appeared on the NES and the original Game Boy, taking the world by storm. And there would be a Game Boy version of this releasing 3 months later in December 1993, but initially in North America instead. So far we have a Famicom release and a Game Boy release of Tetris 2. This Super Famicom version, Tetris Flash, was released just under a year after the initial regular Famicom version, releasing in July 1994 and then coming to North America just a month later in August 1994 as Tetris 2. So all 3 versions were developed and published by TOSC and published by Nintendo, but GameFAQs has it listed that the Super Famicom release was published by Bulletproof Software, so that's pretty interesting. Unsurprisingly, the game is a falling block puzzle game, but it's perhaps a little bit more like Dr. Mario than the original Tetris, where the pieces that fall aren't quite the same continuous pieces of blocks and instead can be a little disconnected. And instead of making you match rows, you match colors instead. So despite not being the exact same as the original amazing Tetris, the game was actually received pretty well and even topped some sales lists at the time. So as a follow-up to the original Tetris, I think it did its job. But 3 months after Tetris Flash, Japan got Ilvanian no Shiro, Ruins of Ilvanian, in October 1994, which is a turn-based strategy RPG developed by Thinking Rabbit and published by Nippon Clary Business companies publishing games. Thinking Rabbit, the developer, doesn't have much that the average person would recognize, but there was some things that I recognized. There was Ultima 3. I've heard of Ultima. There's a Casablanca game, which apparently is not related to the movie, Boxy Boy, which sounds familiar, and Superman on Genesis. Maybe even on the Mega Drive. I don't know. But that's all I could find about Thinking Rabbit, despite it having an awesome name for a developer. And there's not much on this game that I could find. Only a little bit on GiantBomb.com and OpenRetro. But it looks like you control units of some kind, just trying to take over territory with RPG monster battling mechanics. I don't know if it's quite like mech units like Super Robot Wars, but that's as vague as that is, that's kind of what it sounds like. Both websites had the exact same little blurb. I don't know which one came first, but it's kind of compared to Ogre Battle, Fire Emblem, which is that's top of the line there, and both of which are very popular games. They were growing at the time, at least. I think Fire Emblem was probably popular by then, but Ogre Battle might have been growing by then. But either way, that's a high ceiling to reach for Ruins of Ilvanian. And it seems like a great example of a game that overall is just completely lost to time. So, I don't know. It's an interesting one. Seems like it's all by itself. And, kind of cool to add. A game that is a little bit more properly documented, however, is a game called Mystic Arc. So, this is a July 1995 JRPG developed by Produce and published by the Enix Corporation. Enix, of course, would end up becoming Square Enix in the long run, but Produce also worked on some other recognizable series, games like Super Adventure Island, 2 Super Bomberman games. They also developed a game called Elnard that released over 2 years before Mystic Arc and would come to North America as 7th Saga. Now that's important because this game was apparently scheduled to come to North America as the 7th Saga 2, but was canceled, so this game never came to North America. This game is very much a JRPG with lots of similarities to the 7th Saga, and another game that's sandwiched in between them called Brainlord that also came to North America, both of which are part of this Mystic Arc franchise with just a handful of games. But you play as one of 2 characters, Ramir or Ferris, as you wake up in a temple and have to venture through different worlds within the temple to collect arcs to eventually take on the final boss. So Wikipedia notes that each world is within the temple, so how big is this temple? But each world has its own story, so the game is kind of like a series of stories that have the same adventurer, same end goal, but is unique in its own individual right, each individual story is a little separate, right? So in these different worlds, you're getting into random turn-based battles, getting experience points. So despite the unique story, we're definitely not escaping the JRPG allegations with this one, so that's kind of cool. The Mystic Arc series would only get one more game with a sequel to this specific release on PS1, but it seems like this series has been dead in the water otherwise. I don't think the games have been re-released in any way since then, so that's kind of sad, but unfortunate. Still sounds pretty neat though. So Mystic Arc. Next up, not to be confused with the Japanese CD, but this is Toride, which is a December 1994 port of an arcade game released the same year where you play as, drumroll, Mahjong, or more specifically, Mahjong Solitaire. So I have friends that used to play Mahjong all the time in school. Like, literally, we'd be, studying and they would break out Mahjong. But Mahjong Solitaire is evidently a little different, being a little bit more single player focused. So I have never personally played Mahjong or Mahjong Solitaire besides like watching them play. But this game seems like a very arcadey version of Mahjong Solitaire with timers and power-ups and combo rewards that I'm guessing aren't present in the regular tile game. So then again, what do I know? But it's Mahjong. The original arcade version was developed and published by Metro, a developer with a not insignificant arcade library, but this Super Famicom version was published by Takara, who is pretty popular. So that's that. Anyway, we got one more game to talk about. Pretty quick episode. That's okay. And I like to think that we're friends, but we won't be friends anymore after this next game, which is, of course, Super Uno. So Uno needs no introduction as like the best card game ever. Don't give me that look. But if I'm not mistaken, this is the first video game adaptation of Uno. So like, even though it was released exclusively in Japan, it beat out Uno Super World on Japanese Game Boys by like 2 weeks, releasing in November 1993. So like, that's super cool, super neat. The game was developed and published by Tomy, who's pretty funny because they have games for super popular franchises like Monopoly, Where's Waldo, Disney games, Naruto games, but then they also have like these American-based Japanese games, which we've kind of talked a little bit about on this channel, but I don't know, I always find it kind of funny, and Tomy is the culprit behind those kind of games. So one thing I love about video game adaptations of games like these, especially in like Monopoly Party on GameCube, is that they can build in house rules, right? So like not everybody plays Monopoly the exact same way. So like Monopoly Party, you can play Monopoly however you want. And Uno, the Super Uno release, you're allowed to put in house rules that you might have when you play Uno with your friends. It's also funny because GiantBomb.com mentions that there are anime portraits for players to use, like as your sprite, which is kind of weird. And Moby Games mentions that there's a final boss battle against the Uno King, who is just me. But there are a whole bunch of Uno video games. I would love to collect all of them, but there's like quite a few. There's the Uno Small World on Japanese Game Boy. There's an Uno Small World 2 also on Japanese Game Boy. There's also a Saturn and a PS1 release of it, I think. And there's also like PS1 Uno DX. I don't know, like I really like Uno, so I would love to go get them at some point, but I don't know, not what you expected to see at the end of this video, right? So, I don't know, I saved this one for last because this one's kind of funny. But, yeah, that's, it's pretty quick. Random 5 games. When I was setting up these episodes, I was like, oh, let me do 5 games at a time, talk about that, and some of these end up being a little bit short, so maybe I gotta go up to 6. But whatever the case is, thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something. Mystic Arc is probably the most interesting game in this entire episode, but, we got Tetris and we got Uno. But whatever the case is, if there's something I missed about these games, if there's something I got wrong about these games, please correct me. I would love to continue learning about these games as much as I have hopefully taught you something. So, with that said, bye!